We believe that providing open source data sets and documentation can better engage domain experts in the peer community. So to that end, we've developed a separate GitHub repo that hosts our input data and documentation. We've used Jupyter Notebooks, which is an open source web application that pretty seamlessly combines text and code to present documentation for our input data. And we've also connected our GitHub repo to Binder, which is an open source service that can make a GitHub repo interactive. So this means that users who want to interact with the data, don't have this additional barrier of having to clone a repo, set up a Conda environment, and then run the Jupyter Notebooks locally. So in the next slide, I present a short demo of what our setup looks like. So here's a snapshot of our OEO GitHub repo that includes preliminary databases that we're working on, as well as documentation. So this is the documentation directory that includes several Jupyter notebooks that focus on different energy sectors that we include. So buildings, electricity, and transport. And here's a link to Binder, which users can connect to and have Binder open a remote instance of the entire repository. So there's no need to actually clone the repo at all. So using this interface, you can navigate to any one of the documentation notebooks and kind of open it up remotely. So for example, here we're taking a look at the electric sector notebook. You can see that there's ability to embed a table of contents here, as well as look at documentation that's in markdown cells. You can also interact with the input data using these widgets that we've developed. So here we're looking at, for example, investment costs for specific electric technologies. You can select a specific technology to look at, as well as a region that we're using within our database. And you can choose to either look at the data as a figure or a table. And if you have interest, there's also ability to actually go in and modify the code that develops these widgets. So you could use that to maybe modify some of these widgets or develop new widgets depending on your need. And then we also have some other widgets that make it quite useful as you're exploring the input database. So here, for example, this is a quick technology or commodity description lookup tool. You can type in any keyword of interest and it pulls up kind of the associated commodities and technologies within the database. Here we have a network diagram lookup tool. So you can specify specific technology to look at. So here we're looking at the network diagram for bioenergy with CCS. You can hover over the individual nodes to tell you what, and that gives you a description of what those specific technologies or commodities are. Or you could also use this lookup tool that we've developed to kind of get a description of what some of these short codes stand for when looking up technologies and commodities within our input database. So these are just several ways in which you can interact with some of these input data sets that we're putting together through Jupyter Notebooks and through Binder, hopefully making it a lot more accessible than looking at a whole bunch of Excel or CSV files.